Welcome to the State of Affairs in partnership with Serbian Radio Chicago. We are having conversations that matter. I have a great guest today, very interesting guest, Brian Gamble. He's an accomplished data scientist and a tech visionary. He's been around for over 3 decades in this industry. He also served as an intel analyst in the United States Navy during the deployment, during the breakup of Yugoslavia, which is a very interesting part for our listeners. So, Brian, welcome.
Hello. Thank you, Olga.
So let's begin with the early on in your career. You were very young when you were deployed to former Yugoslavia, and from what I understand, the conversations that we've had, such a young person having those kinds of clearances and access to the information that some of us who have lived through the destruction of that country now, in retrospect, look back and consistently we ask ourselves why. Why were the Serbs painted as the bad guys? And how can we reflect on that looking at what is happening today?
Absolutely. Yeah. 19 years old. I was actually chasing girls at high school 6, 7 months prior, right? So it was like a big transition in life. But being deployed to the war, I had no global experience. Most Americans, we kind of live in a bubble. No exception for me at the age of 19. I watched the news. I accepted what the news was telling me as the truth. We had just watched the Gulf War. A lot of things that happened through that war. So there I was, 19 years of age with a clearance I felt that I should not have had. I don't think a 19-year-old anybody should have any access to like information like that because it is a lot. It's a lot to process. But yeah, I was there, and I speak about this in the movie Into the Light a little bit. But I was the guy who had the clearance and I had access to all the information. If anybody in this forward operating base that we moved needed information, intelligence, they would have to come to me. There was no other way to get this information. So that would be my day. I'd get up really early. I'd go through all the message traffic, print it out, stamp it, log it, and wait for the person that was supposed to get that intelligence to show up to the tent, and they would get that. They would read it, process it, bring it back, have some questions, Q&A with me about my analysis on certain things, and then I would destroy it. So I was kind of that full cycle for intelligence, from the print to the destruction and everything in between, and an analysis of that. But in the movie I speak about, I would come out for a break, or I would just kind of walk around, and there was always a place where the media was aligned. It was Media Row. So CNN, Sky News, BBC, other international news agencies, and they were saying things. Not only was it not true, now mind you, I had the information. I knew what the truth was and what the truth wasn't. Not only were they not saying the truth, but what struck me as odd was they were all saying the same thing. And these were organizations that I'm thinking, like, what would CNN and Sky News and Tokyo, like, what would these news agencies have that they would all literally say the same incorrect talking points? And and I would go and verify it. I would watch it, I would listen, I would watch it, I would listen. And honestly, they call it the red pill moment of my life. I was like, oh my gosh, they're lying to the world about what's going on in this war. They're lying to everybody. And it felt designed that way. It felt like they were being told what to say. And there was it was a NATO mission that I was a part of, and there was a Dutch officer, and I became really good friends. And he, this was 1995. The internet wasn't what it is today. The access to information.
So it started in Bosnia, right? You started in Bosnia.
Yeah. So I choppered over to Split, Croatia, and then from there just went through. I didn't know the name of half the towns that I went through the former Yugoslavia, but we were all over the place. But yeah, so this Dutch officer kind of was laughing. It was like, well, you never heard of the military industrial complex? You didn't watch Eisenhower's farewell speech? I was 19 years old. I was like, yeah, I know that Eisenhower was the president. What are you talking about? And he kind of like told me why we were in this war. He was kind of a pacifist. Dutch, he was a civilian but he worked for the Dutch military as a civilian, but they made him an officer, and he became an officer to be in the war. And he told me like these people would not be here if they weren't saying exactly what they were told to say by the communications, the director of the communications, the officer in charge of communications. And and it just really made me think, wow, how many times have I been lied to by the media about the wars that I've watched? Because I had a brother in the Gulf War, and I just thought like, wow, it really, really made me think. Like, I don't even think I slept that night, just trying to process it all. But I came out the next day with a completely different attitude about the war, really digging, why are we here? What are we doing? Who are we doing it to? And then I started seeing people coming on our base that we were being told, don't fire up your barbecue grills, don't fire up your equipment during these hours, don't do this. And then they were like joking, like where they could cut your head off while you're sleeping. And I'm like, and I said, well, what the hell are they doing on our base? And they had a name. I may mispronounce it, but I always called it El Mujahid,
El
which
Mujahideen.
yeah, exactly. They
Yeah.
were the Mujahideen in Bosnia was the translation, I guess. And
Mm-hmm.
they were there with the CIA going on missions in to kill Serbian, military. And I think Archon, the guy with the tiger on his jacket, there was all this stuff. And I was reading this traffic, being told that these people could cut my head off, but somehow they're on my base and they're my ally. It just didn't make
And
any sense
somehow
to
they're
me.
on your side, or you're
And
on their side.
somehow, and we're protecting them, and we're defending these people, and like it just really threw me for a loop. So it was when I really started digging the information that I had at my disposal. What were they doing? Who were these people? Who were that? Everything. And that was my thrust into war and information in the information war. And I was very vocal about that to people that I served with, and I was pretty much told to be quiet. You can't be talking like this. You can't be saying these things. And it got me in trouble. It got my phones tapped. It led me down a very bad path with my Navy career, leading up to me being put on a list that they kick you out.
Hmm.
So, nowadays, if you don't get the jab, they kick you out. People don't understand this tactic is not new. If you don't obey us, you get kicked out. They've been doing this, at least when I served, it was called the Reduction in Forces Act. They didn't like what you were saying. If they didn't vibe with you or whatever, all they had to do was put your name on that list and you had no recourse. You were kicked out of the military honorably. I mean, I got out honorably, but like you couldn't, I mean, I thought my next duty station would be Keflavik, Iceland. Like I had everything
Hmm.
arranged, but boom, I was on a list, said, you're out of here, Gamble. And I'm thinking like, whoa. So I just started.
So from Bosnia, did you continue? How long were you actually serving? Did you continue into Kosovo?
I left the service. I got out of the theater in 1996.
Okay.
Um, and then I got out of the service in 1997, end of 1997. So that year of being out of the war and surviving my command, like navigating those waters was very treacherous. But yeah, that was about it. It was I4, the implementation force
Hmm.
that I was a part of. So that was my time frame there. It wasn't long, but it was long enough. I said,
Interesting, but it was long enough, and essentially it almost cost you your career in terms of you realizing what it is that we're doing in foreign nations, what it
mhm,
means to nation build, and who these alleged allies are, as you said, that we were protecting.
mhm.
Now, in retrospect, why were we there?
Well, Bill Clinton seemed to have this thing to protect the enemies of America. He protected, a lot of people don't realize he protected Osama bin Laden. He had many opportunities to kill Osama bin Laden. I think there's a book about it, about his treason, they called it. But it seemed to me that he was a staunch ally of the Mujahideen in Bosnia, and we were there to, he called it genocide, right? That was the term everybody used. Stop genocide, stop genocide. And yeah, I mean, it, it was just it was a real crazy experience for me, because honestly, I felt, but when I was packing up my stuff to leave, I felt like I was fighting for the wrong side. Honestly, that was my true gut feeling, was the people in the space, somehow, some way, Ron Paul says somehow, some way, this is going to be blowback. Somehow,
Yes.
some way, these people that I'm being warned about next to me are somehow going to come back and harm Americans. And guess what? They did. Two of the
And
nine
sure
11
enough, they did.
hijackers was
And you
in
mentioned
this
some
group.
names to me the other day, looking at 9/11 and then post
Mhm.
9/11. Given that I've studied this almost my whole adult life throughout the
Mhm.
career, every single terrorist attack that has happened since 9/11 has somehow had a connection to the Balkans. And you brought up some names to me the other day as we were watching this thing in Israel unravel.
Mhm.
Hamas was very much present in Bosnia at the time, right?
Yes, yes. I mean, it's all connected. Whether it be the snipers that came out of Bosnia, the bomb builders, the bomb instruction. The people that instructed people to make bombs. Richard Reed, the shoe bomber. Well, like all of these connections to the Balkans. Two of the 9/11 hijackers. You've got Al Qaeda leadership that were operating in and around, in Bosnia during the time. And it just, yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here like on 9/11, 2 weeks after 9/11, I knew right away it was bin Laden, because I had read so much sit rep message traffic, everything seemed to be bin Laden, bin Laden, bin Laden. So when the plane hit the World Trade Center, I was like, well, bin Laden. That was the first thing that came to my mind. But I didn't, I think it was a week or so later, they started showing the faces of the hijackers, right? And then two of those hijackers, I'm thinking like, whoa, those dudes, were part of this operation with the CIA, so all of that stuff came back to me about like knowing that this somehow would come back to haunt us. And and it did, whether you were being sniped at in Iraq, or on that plane that Richard Reed tried to blow up, or 9/11. It just, I felt like I was vindicated in a lot of ways about my feelings of fighting for the wrong side in that war. I mean, honestly, I'm kind of like a constitutionalist. I don't think that's a conflict Americans should have been involved with. Period. That's just my gut. But like, if we were there fighting a war, I definitely didn't feel like fighting. We were fighting for the right side, for the right cause. But
Well, given that the Serbs were the only kingdom in that region and have been an ally historically, traditionally, the only Christian nation there, allied with the United States throughout the First and Second World Wars, having seen what Bill Clinton and then the charade of characters around him, like Madeleine Albright and Sandy Berger and Wesley Clark and everybody in between, who is somehow now, with Madeleine Albright, of course, passed. But all of these characters are reappearing yet again throughout Obama and Biden administrations. What do
yeah.
you make of it now, given that post President Trump, here we are back and the world is completely imploding?
Well, these people, I mean, they seem somehow always seem to have a way to gain from these wars. Bill Clinton, and I saw Obama came out and pretty much blamed us for the attacks of Hamas. That's the way, I read the statement from Obama. But these wars seem to attract this group more than ever. And I don't know what their vested interest is in, these perpetual wars, or getting involved in these conflicts, specifically with the wrong side, right? It's
So
almost,
have we
it's
been on the wrong side consistently, which is so sad to come to that realization, especially as a military veteran, that you've been
mhm.
fighting consistently for this country, but on the wrong side.
Yeah, I think it's it seems to be a trend of the wars we're involved with, we somehow seem to be if we get involved with them, seem to be on the wrong side. And whether we're removing, Saddam Hussein, which we saw the yeah, Saddam Hussein wasn't the Man of the Year award, but my goodness, he seemed to keep the Middle East in some sort of balance. Same with
Absolutely.
Gaddafi. You move
Yep.
Gaddafi, and the next thing you know, Benghazi, and all these things are happening. It's like I don't. It's difficult to wrap your head around. It's like, are these people, Bill Clinton, Obama, Biden, are these people just that ignorant, or is there a deeper, darker reason for them getting us involved in these conflicts on the wrong side? And honestly, it almost seems like it has an anti-Christian vibe to it. I mean, when you sit back and you look at this stuff, it's like they, I it just seems like they're always backing the people that have a very different ideology than we do, a very different religious belief system than we do. And for the life of me, it doesn't make any sense. I would like to think they're not that ignorant, but like they stand the game somehow, and that's why we've got to be careful with the information that we get fed, whether it be about Hamas or what we see playing out on the news today, with these Palestinian demonstrations everywhere. The state, yet again, the stage is being set for more war, for more calamity. And it almost as if the more war and the more calamity, the more they control, the more power they get.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
it takes me right back to that point in my life where it's military industrial complex. This is the narrative, this is the whole point. And fear, honestly, fear can, allows you to be controlled. And I think the more fear they can cause, because now we don't even know who's in our own country because of our open southern border. We just kind of juxtapose what we saw in Israel as perhaps happening in the United States, and that causes a lot of fear, which causes a lot of irrational beliefs. Oh, get here, take my freedom away, just make me safe. And that seems to be the overarching thing, is we keep losing more freedoms the more the world is in this calamitous situation, whether it be COVID or whatever. That just seems to be the motive to me, is calamity and fear and war and threats of war and creating the big boogeyman, you know.
So as we go through the motions of, as our good friend General Flynn calls it, fifth generation warfare, which
Mm-hmm.
is coming at you from all sides. I mean, it's technology, it's what you see on TV, it's everywhere, it's all around you, it's psychological, it's mental. Um, and your question is great. What do they stand to gain, and what is it that they want? And I think we can agree on absolute control,
Yeah.
obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think they're that ignorant, as you said. So there is a deeper, much darker, subversive
Mm-hmm.
moment here. Um, and I want to talk about what is happening. We saw in Washington, D.C. yesterday and the day before, Berlin, all of the cities around Europe, hundreds of thousands of people on the streets. Yes, maybe rightfully so, wanting the civilian killings to stop. But at the same time, you would think, well, these were the people that voted for Biden
Mm-hmm.
and for the Democrats. And here they were 2 nights ago, ready to bust through the White House.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very interesting place that we find ourselves in. And somehow, and I do agree with you, somehow it seems that all of this is going to break over the backs of hardworking Christian white Americans or white
Mm-hmm.
Europeans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now we've got some Islamophobia task force that we're being, oh gosh, now we can't say this, or what does that mean? We're not allowed to tell the truth about, this ideology or what? But yeah, it's world global domination. I think that is the easiest way to say it, and I think, you know, I hear people talk about that and they say like World Economic Forum, Harari. I say, but you got to understand, there's seems to be two veins of world domination. There's the World Economic Forum. They publicly say this, but you also have, Islam. There's sects of Islam that literally believe in world domination. They have a map. like by the year, whatever, 2050, they want total global domination of Islam. And you're talking Sharia law, you're talking about, things that does not vibe with the Constitution or our rights. So, so what I see now is kind of like, oh, well, they like our freedoms being eroded at the World Economic Forum, but Islam loves the narrative shift of, back, Israel bad, Palestinian good. Like, I see just these two veins of world control just like competing over one another.
But
It
do you
really
think
is
they're
crazy.
competing, or is it actually what we often hear, the red and green alliance of some sort, that they are
Yeah.
somehow all working towards one goal? Are they two separate ideologies, or somehow the powers that be, whatever they are, even behind the World Economic Forum, are looking to use these two different veins, as you put it,
Mhm.
to achieve one single goal again?
I think both veins look to the other one and say, how can we use them and their initiatives to further our goals? I personally don't think, the 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 beliefs of the Ayatollahs, the end game for the Ayatollahs is the same as the end game for Klaus Schwab. I think that's kind of an oxymoron if you really want to know the truth, but I just see them as, using whatever levers of fear that they can pull to control, those of us who are fighting this, this information war, these wars, but it's crazy because I've spent my whole life in information and tracking down variances and trying to figure out what's true, what's not true. And even I'm kind of like little thrown off, like, okay, what, something's going on, and I haven't quite put my finger on it, but I do know that the two levers of control are definitely active. Now we see more of the Islamic domination, if I'm allowed to say that now, with Kamala's warning, trying to take over the world with their ideology. Um, Really, that's at the heart of what I think we're seeing now. But certainly, the World Economic Forum are going to use whatever calamity to their advantage.
And is
If
it, I have to go back now to the things that have certainly been happening here in this country, and we'll talk about the fact that you are so in tune with data and you follow these trends. And I want to go back to our elections. But interestingly, speaking of that Islamic element, it did all start back at where you were as a young guy. This was introduced in former Yugoslavia, in the Balkans. The Islamist cells that were introduced there, that remain to this day,
Mhm.
actually started there against the Christian Serbs. And while the entire United States and Europe, or as we call it, NATO, supported this Islamic element fighting against Christian Serbs, here it is knocking on our door today. It's
Yep.
knocking on the doors of every single city in Europe,
Mhm.
every single city here in the United States. We were looking the other day together, I think, with General Flynn, at these different bases and training camps that we here have in the United
Mhm.
States.
Yep.
This has been going on for so long, but somehow, as you said, we, or our leaders, our dear leaders, have been in very close alliance with these Islamic
Mhm.
elements, and they're everywhere.
Yep. Yep. I
And
think
not the
that
moderate
that's
ones, but the hardcore extremism.
hmm I think that they're just either complicit unknowingly or knowingly, but the end result is going to be, attacks in the United States, right? We're already at red levels, of these threat assessments by the feds. So these attacks are designed to incite fear and to sacrifice our freedoms, right? This is how after 9/11 we got the Patriot Act. The Patriot
Yes.
Act allowed for what is happening to President Trump, and this spying on U.S. citizens through this court, the secret court, and that's them capturing all of our data indefinitely, and it just boggles the mind. And I tell people this, like, listen, if you're ever on the wrong side of the government, they'll go to the secret courts and they'll get a warrant. And what that allows them to do is to go to your folder. There's a folder with your name on it. And not only do they get to look at, it used to be back in the day, you get a warrant, you can tap the phone. Well, now you're going to know what I'm talking about now and in the future. Now they can go back to a folder and look at everything you've ever done, that you put online. All of that stuff is a historical capture of who you are. They now have access to all of that. And it's stored indefinitely in Utah. And every single one of them, not just Americans, that's the thing. It's every person on planet Earth that uses electronic devices. Your information is being stored at these NSA centers. And it's again, 9/11, Patriot Act. Now they have a weapon. Not only do they have a weaponized courts, they have weaponized secret courts, and they can go and they can spy on you. Warrantless surveillance, right? Section 702. Which allows them to just spy on you and look at, that's set to expire at the end of the year. I hope it does. But people use that to like spy on political donors. Oh, I want to know who donated to this candidate. They just go in there and access
And
Edward
it's all
Snowden.
there.
And it's all there. Everything that's the most important thing. And one of the things we talk about in the movie is like, and I talk about Bumblehive, the code name for the facility in Utah, but they are keeping and tracking. Edward Snowden kind of woke us all up to it. But every single thing that we do, this right here, is going to be stored in a folder in Bumblehive with my name and your name on it. And they can access that, they can do a search term and everything that we talked about, it'll pop up and say, yeah, here it is.
Interesting. So going back to, again, your Intel background, I just want to briefly touch on Israel and what happened with the Hamas attack. Now, just as an Intel officer, as a veteran, we know that Israel is one of the most protected countries in this world. How did this even happen?
Well, I've been asked that a lot, and the short answer is they knew. The Israeli, so the intelligence agencies are typically the first to know and the first to get blamed. So so not only did the Israeli intelligence knew, the US intelligence knew, we knew. But the problem that I believe, this is my personal belief, is that you have to understand the dailies that come in from the intelligence agencies in Israel. Imagine who they're dealing with. They probably get a threat every hour on the hour by every Tom, Dick, and Harry in Hamas or Hezbollah or any one of these fanatical groups. So there's information saturation, surely. I think also you had Trump, thawing relations with Saudi Arabia and Israel.
Mm-hmm.
You had Palestinians who are working, getting paid a wage to work in higher numbers. So surely, I believe the intelligence was there. Okay, another attack. Okay, another attack. Okay, another attack coming any day now, And then they're weighing the political stuff because Israel was already in a damn near civil war over some judicial,
Yes. And that's very important. Not a lot
things.
of people know that.
Yeah. So there was already a very delicate political, issue there. And you got Saudi Arabia and you got the Palestinians working, and yeah, you get some information they're going to attack us again. You know, I personally see it as not an intelligence failure because the intelligence agency doesn't make policy. It doesn't
Sure.
create the war. It doesn't go, do the battle planning. That is for the politicians and the generals and the admirals, right? So I see it as a failure of leadership in Israel. Now I don't know how
But
high that
because they
goes
were
on.
in such a disarray, I mean, Netanyahu was not doing all that well as it is.
Yeah, yeah. And
That
if he's
that
getting a
makes
daily briefing, he's like, yeah, okay, we got threats, but man, I'm dealing. If I call up the military to go do some incursions into Gaza and I'm wrong, it seemed to me like
absolutely.
a very, very delicate political situation. And I think the intelligence agencies absolutely knew, but they know, again, there could be saturation because you're always pulling in data. And I think that honestly, my gut tells me it was a failure to act on intelligence that, I'm not going to sit here and say, you should have acted on that intelligence. It's just a call that wasn't made.
Understood. Well, let's talk about President Trump since you brought him up. And we all know where we stand on that in terms of the support and the election that is coming up. But I want to go back to 2020, given that you have been so deeply involved with the data side of voter rolls and just voting, and the fact that nothing has changed for us since 2020, but here we are yet again anticipating another election, even though we've done nothing to change it, or we're powerless to do anything. What happened in 2020?
I think a lot of it, the issue now, there are some that, we look at the Dominion voting machines, we look at the equipment and things like that. I originally was interested and fascinated with that because obviously these machines were quote unquote not allowed to connect to the internet, right? They're not connected to the internet. The fact of the matter is they were, and they seem to all they always seem to act like, well, it was a process failure. It's nothing illegal. It was just a process failure. And what we mean by the connectivity of the internet is they claim it wasn't connected to the internet by doing what we call air gapping it from the internet. They use the same copper, they connect to the same internet like everybody else, but internet service providers have the ability to create private tunnels on the internet called VPNs, virtual private networks.
Mm-hmm.
So the equipment that wasn't connected to the internet was quote unquote on these private networks that ran over the internet. Now the problem with that is like, okay, well, anybody in that chain of establishing that connection could easily allow other connections to come in. The only way you're really going to tell is by looking at what the logs tell you every single thing that's going on with the equipment. If it's a Windows machine, it's got a Windows log. If it's a router that routes the stuff, it's got a router log. Everything is logged in this equipment. Now, the problem we had, and it's important for people to hear this, when these routers, they only have so much space to record logs, and then they typically delete the oldest and keep going, right? Well, the law is we're supposed to keep this stuff for so many years. So what they end up doing is they have to have a service to dump those logs too. And that's where people have started hearing about this thing called Splunk. Splunk is a service that allows you, once your router starts filling up with logs, it uploads it to Splunk, and then you have a fresh log again. So it just keeps storing and storing and storing all these logs. Well, in Maricopa County, one of the things was they would not give us access to these logs. And it's like, well, if it was truly not connected, allowing connections outside of this tunnel that you supposedly had, well, then a log would tell us what's routing what. So, and then we had a sheriff that says, well, we're not giving them access to Splunk logs because it has people's private information on it. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's literally IP addresses and MAC addresses to and from. There's no Brian Gamble on there, or I did this, and it's not even going to tell me like you did this on that machine. It literally just tells you who was connected to what, when, and for how long, and how much information was transmitted. In a nutshell, that's it. But we didn't have access. So my immediate reaction was like, well, stop with the machines, because what's going to happen is you're going to go to court and you're going to have people there that are not technical people, and you're going to talk it. Patrick Byrne calls it dolphin speak. We're going to we're going to speak a completely different language. Their people are going to speak completely different languages. Everybody in the court's going to be confused, and you're not going to get anywhere. So for me, it was let's look at the physical ballots. Let's look at the paper, the secure paper that it was supposed to be on, the printers. Jovan Holzer, he did a great job explaining the calibration of the machines could throw things into adjudication, and adjudication, I think that person meant to vote for Biden, like signature verification issues. For me, all the answer lies within the paper. Now, they got away with it because the voter rolls are dirty. Now, if you have dirty voter rolls, well, guess what? You have a lot of ballots that you could print from a dirty voter roll, and that'll match in an audit. So if you do an audit,
Hmm.
it's a one, it's a one. Yeah, but you're bringing in a one from a dirty voter roll. That not one should not be there. Therefore, that vote should be canceled out. So the biggest
Interesting.
and best thing that we can do is fight to get our voter rolls cleaned. I think Tom Fitton at Judicial Watch did a phenomenal job, does a phenomenal job in the courts. Like Kentucky, where I'm at now, they removed 2 million, names from the voter rolls. 2 million from the. We got an
Wow.
election tomorrow for governor.
Yes,
So
yes.
this is very important stuff, is to clean out the voter rolls. Seth Keshel, I think he has a Captain Seth's top 10 things to do to secure our elections,
Hmm.
and definitely cleaning the voter rolls is one. Now, to your point about going into this election in 2024, not much has changed. I would say in some states they have had some wins that may impact the states, whether it be, okay, you're no longer allowed to have Zucker boxes, right? These
Sure.
boxes just thrown out there, they can just fill them up. I think these small win, the voter rolls being cleaned up, voter ID, these small wins, I think will add up. Now, will it be enough to overcome the impending cheat? I don't know, but the good thing about Kentucky is, well, they're going to have to find somewhere else to get their dirty vote because 2 million names are off the rolls. So I always say the tangibles like the paper and the ballots and the voter rolls. That's how you win the election, for the most part. There are other things we can do technically, but at the end of the day, God bless Mike Lindell. I know they've been hitting these cyber symposiums and this packet capture stuff. I haven't seen it. It's been hidden from me for whatever reason. And until
Mm.
I see it as a packet capture expert, I do deep packet inspections. I've done them for global companies for a long time. I know what I'm talking about when I see these things. I have yet to see anything that would say, oh, okay, this is evidence that the Chinese or the Russians or whoever came into our system and manipulated the Dominion voting machines. I
You've
personally
done work like this for Fortune 500 companies,
yeah,
just to
yeah,
that point.
absolutely. I've done this, and I showed up hearing about these packet captures, Mike Lindell and the symposium, and I said, "Great, when can I see him?" And it was like, "Well, who has him? This
Hmm.
guy." Well, can I see him? No. Well, he's going to be at the symposium. Go to the symposium. And I said, "Well, I'm not going there unless I see these things." And then
Sure.
the day of, I said, "Where are the packet?" Oh, he had a stroke. He had a stroke. Yes, it's like it just becomes to me like I'm a if you're going to say it, show it. Show me the evidence or shut up about it. I'm that kind of person, and I just I'm not saying it's not true. I'm not saying it didn't happen at the machine level. I'm just simply saying I don't see a pathway to victory if that's what we're hinging our all of our evidence of the election fraud was on the machine.
Wow.
I think the best things we can do is the things like I explained.
Interesting. Well, on that last point, um, weaponized agencies, weaponized courts, weaponized justice system, weaponized everything, not only against the duly elected president, but against
Mhm.
every single one of his voters. I keep going back to, I love repeating this, Darren Beatty, after January 6th, I think it was January 10th, tweeted out 70 plus million Americans are today the Serbs of the 1990s. And that consistently resonates with me. But will President Trump get the nomination? What do you think the 2024 outcome will be? And where do we go from here?
I mean, yeah, it's a great question. I personally believe if Trump is allowed to run in 2024, he will be the next president. Um, I know there will be cheating, but I think that there is so much issue with Biden, through the minority communities, through suburban women, like all these groups that they just were shooing. I think there's a
Yes.
real big crack in their armor, and they acknowledge that, and I think they know this. Um, I think that Trump left alone will win 2024. Um, but the big question is will they allow him? Because they're afraid of him winning. And the more afraid they are of him winning, the more they're going to try to keep him off the ballot in the states. You got these people, I mean, these judges, like I just can't get the image out of my mind of this judge just smiling for the camera, just this attitude that they're above President Trump, which means they're above President Trump supporters. The arrogance of these people. I think Trump wins, and I think we're going to have a wonderful day of reckoning in which we once and for all deal with the weaponization of the media, of these courts, of, look what was dropped today in, about the Nashville manifesto. Like, instead of attacking why were we told this, or why was the narrative painted this way, now we know this is what their thoughts were. Oh no, let's attack the messenger. Let's go after the person who gave us this information. Like, they do not like the sunshine. They do not like being pulled into the light,
Yes.
and it exposes them. And I think that it's going to get worse before it gets better for President Trump. That's the fear that I have. I hope he stays safe. I hope, he can weather these storms at these states, that are trying to keep him off the ballot. But I have to, I pray, a lot for the outcome to be positive, because again, I think if it were a fair election, he would win hands down.
Sure.
In 2024, he stays on the ballot. I believe he wins narrowly, but he wins.
Well, luckily, we at least, as you said, have the sunshine now to expose all of the crooked, corrupt people that have put us in this position. And I think the greatest legacy of President Trump's, whether he wins or not, the greatest legacy of his presidency was actually to help us wake up and uncover all of the corruption and
Mm.
put a spotlight on everything that we have been lied to about by the media, as you mentioned, starting in the 1990s up until today. If they lied then, they are truly and continuously lying to us throughout today. So all I can say is I'm praying with you that the outcome will be positive. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.